There's an old saying that goes like this: money goes to money. I've heard it many times over the years, but I don't think people truly understand why it makes sense. While it's not visible, money has a force behind it that's similar to gravity. And as we learned at a young age, the gravity of larger objects pulls smaller objects towards them. The same can be said for money when it's invested. Now, there's three factors of investing that can be used to pull massive amounts of money your way. All three work just like gravity, and those three factors are yield, amount, and time. And before we jump into studying those three factors, the first thing we need to understand is compounding interest. We're going to review the most basic scenarios so you can understand this powerful monetary concept that Einstein deemed the eighth wonder of the world. So for this compounding interest review, we're going to be looking at two different scenarios: putting $1 a day into a glass jar and $1 a day into a savings account. And we're going to be doing this over 10 years. So first up, for the glass jar, $1 a day added to this jar for 10 years. There's 365 days in a year. For 10 years, that's 3,650 days. Now the very simple part, that equals $3,650 at the end of this 10 years. Now, let's see what happens if that money is put into a savings account over 10 years. Now, we just have an interest rate of 1% here. This is currently far below the average interest rate of a savings account. But we're using 1% to show how powerful compounding interest really is, even at the smallest of interest rates. So to study this a little bit closer, let's jump over to a compounding interest calculator to review. Okay, here we are now at this free, easy-to-use compounding interest calculator. Step 1, initial investment is 0. Monthly contributions is going to be 30. That's about equal to $1 a day. And the length of time is 10 years. And the estimated interest rate is going to be 1%. And this is going to compound annually. So let's take a look at what this does. So the blue line here represents the total amount of money that you put in. That's $3,650. That's equivalent to putting your money in a glass jar. And the orange line you could see is $3,766. Now that's what happens when you put your money into a savings account, even at just 1% over 10 years. Now back to this comparison. At the end of 10 years, you're going to have $3,766. That's a difference of $126, or 3.5% more money in your savings account compared to leaving it in a glass jar. And one may ask, how is it possible for just a 1% interest rate to yield a 3.5% increase in your money? And the answer is this: it's very simple. Compounding interest. Now keep in mind, this is just 1%. There are many other investment vehicles out there that can get you far higher yields. If you were to put your money into bonds, you could easily get a 4% return or more where the current interest rates are today. And over the last decade, the stock market has returned an average of about 10% year over year, where even investors who know nothing could buy ETFs just like this and get those returns. And to quickly review those scenarios, had you put the same amount of money into bonds for 10 years at a 4% rate, that would leave you with $4,322. And investing that same amount into the stock market at a 10% yield is going to leave you with $5,737. Meaning that both scenarios are going to leave you with much more money than had you just put that $1 a day into a glass jar. Let's take a look at all of this information side by side so we can see how powerful compounding interest truly is when it comes to making you more money. Now let's review this visual that has all four of these investments side by side. And once again, we're investing $1 a day into each of them. And as you work your way down the chart, the yield is going to increase for each respective investment. This results in more money for you. But let's focus on the stock market. You can see at the bottom there, after 10 years of investing your money in the stock market, you'd have almost 45% more money compared to leaving it in a glass jar. And that's because compounding interest truly does act like gravity, and it helps multiply your money at an exponential rate. And once again, this is why Einstein referred to compounding interest as the eighth wonder of the world. Now, let's quickly zoom in and see this compounding interest in action. And to closely track it, I've highlighted it yellow. So for the savings account, you're going to put your first dollar in and get a 1% interest rate on that dollar. Now, after your first month, you're going to have $1.01, as seen in the top right-hand box. But when you go to month number 2, you're going to add $1 as your monthly contribution, and your balance is now $2.01. And when that amount gets a 1% interest rate applied to it, it becomes $2.03, so on and so forth. And when you get to month number 4 of doing this, your balance is $4.06. And you can see there in month number 4 that you've already accumulated 6 cents in interest. And compare that to the 1 cent of interest just 2 months prior. That's a 600% increase. Now, I know we're only talking about a couple of cents here in this example, but when you increase your yield, amount, and time, you begin to see the compounding interest amount go from just a couple of cents to double-digit, triple-digit, or even quadruple-digit dollar amounts, increasing your wealth exponentially over time. And here's a visual to help explain what I was talking about in the intro to this video, how larger objects in the universe pull smaller objects towards them. When you have a larger yield, as seen at the bottom of this, it's going to pull a lot more money towards you compared to just having a 1% yield, as seen at the top. But when you put your money into higher yield investments like the stock market, it does come with risk, so you need to be careful. Now, the stock market does go up over 70% of the time, but throughout history, there have been some really bad stock market crashes and bear markets, so it's something you need to research and be aware of. So now that we've covered yield and how it can be used to pull a lot of money your way, we're now going to study amount and how even small differences in the amount you invest can also pull a lot of money your way, leaving a drastic difference in your future wealth. For this segment, we're going to be investing into the stock market at a 10% yield for 10 years. In this first example, we'll be investing just $100 a month. This is going to leave us with $19,125 after 10 years. Now, for example number 2, let's say that we decided to make some small cuts to our lifestyle just to save a little bit of money. And now we have an extra $100 a month that we're able to invest on top of the first $100 a month. That's going to leave us with $200 a month over 10 years. And let's see what we have now. We're going to be left with $38,250 after 10 years. And for this final example, we've decided to get very serious about our investing. We've made some drastic cuts to our lifestyle. For this scenario, let's just say we decided not to get a new truck, and we've also canceled our premium gym membership for a more budget-friendly gym. Now we're going to have $500 a month to invest, once again, 10 years at a 10% yield. This is going to leave us with just under $100,000 at the end of 10 years. Now here we can see all 3 of these investment amounts on the same chart. And yes, it's rather obvious that if you invest more, you should have more in the end. But when you put these amounts side by side on a chart like this, it becomes more clear that making some lifestyle changes could result in you having an investment portfolio of almost $100,000 in just 10 years. And the final thing to discuss regarding amount is your initial investment. For this, we're going to be using the same parameters, $100 a month over 10 years with a yield of 10%. And when you have a $0 initial investment, after 10 years, you're going to have $19,125. But when you increase your initial investment to $1,000, you're going to be left with more money in the end. You're going to have $21,719. That's almost $2,600. And this just goes to show when you put a lot of money in, or any amount of money in early on, it gives that money more time to compound time and time again. And just like when we increased our yield and how that pulled more money towards us, when you increase your amount, we can see here now that that's also going to pull more money towards us. And the final factor regarding compounding interest is time. We've covered yield and we've covered amount. So now let's dive into time. Time might be the most important factor when it comes to compounding interest and building wealth. And that's for 2 reasons. Number 1, when you have your money invested for long periods of time, you give that money more time to compound time and time again, no pun intended. And reason number 2 is that there's nothing you can do to get more time. No matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, you can't get it back. And unfortunately, people learn about investing and the magic of compounding interest too late. And if you're worried that you're starting too late, it's better to start late than never. And as we just covered, if you can find ways to increase yield and amount, it can certainly help offset any lost time. So here we are again with our trusty compound interest calculator. We're going to stick with the basic scenario that we've been using this whole time, $100 a month for 10 years with a 10% yield that compounds annually. And to no surprise, we've seen this one before, that's going to leave us with $19,125 after 10 years. But let's see what happens when we add just 5 years to this time frame. So we started with 10, and now we're going to add 5, making it a 15-year time frame for this investment. That's going to leave us with $38,127. And adding 5 years to this time frame here, that's a 50% increase in the time frame. But going from 19,000 to 38,000 is a 100% increase in the amount of money that you're going to have in the end here. Now, to study this a little bit closer, let's see what 20 years of investing with the same amount will do. You're going to be left with $68,730 after 20 years. And while we're here, let's look at 30 years of investing. You're going to be left with $197,393 of investing just $100 a month over 30 years with a 10% rate in the stock market. Now, we talked about it before. Stock market can fluctuate. It can actually go down year over year. So something to once again be aware of. But check this out. This is a very important part of this study of time right here. Year 20 to year 30. This is the final decade. And look at this orange line. This orange line represents the amount of money that someone would have in this investment portfolio. It curls upward and it really starts to accelerate that wealth exponentially, leaving the person with almost $200,000 at the end of 30 years for just $100 a month. That is the power of time when it comes to compounding interest. And here are all those investment amounts side by side, 10, 15, 20, and 30 years. Just look how much more money you have in 30 years if you just leave that money in, letting it compound time and time again. Now back to this visual for the final time. On the left-hand side, we have the green circles representing the length of time invested. And at the top, you have a very small time frame that doesn't pull very much money your way compared to the larger time frames you can see at the bottom. But before we move on to debt, let's review what we've discussed so far in this video. We've reviewed the three factors of investing: yield, amount, and time. And when you increase one or a combination of these three factors, it's going to lead to a massive increase of your wealth in the end. And it's rather obvious, but having money to invest in the first place can be very hard to come by. But I hope this video has helped you realize that you don't need a lot of free cash to improve your long-term financial situation. And to demonstrate this further, here are three long-term investing scenarios where only minimal amounts of money are being invested monthly. First, only $50 a month over 30 years in the stock market is going to leave you with $100,000 in the end. And if we up this to just $75 a month, we're going to be left with just about $150,000 after 30 years. And just $100 a month over 30 years in the stock market is going to leave you with just under $200,000. And here are all those investment scenarios side by side. At the top, this is what $100 a month will get you. Now, $100 a month is less than most gym memberships and cable subscriptions nowadays. And even if you only start with $50 a month and slowly increase your contributions, you'll be thanking yourself down the line. So now that we've thoroughly covered how yield, amount, and time can pull massive amounts of money your way, it's equally as important to talk about debt and how the interest on debt can pull money away from you. Now, this portion of the video is going to be much more brief. We're only going to be covering the two most commonly found forms of debt. First are loans that have a fixed interest rate, an interest rate that doesn't change, very commonly found with car loans. And second, amortizing loans, very commonly found with mortgages. So first up, we're going to discuss loans that have a fixed interest rate. And once again, auto loans commonly fall into this category. And here are the parameters for this loan. We're paying $40,000 for this car over a term of 60 months, which is equal to 5 years, with an interest rate of 7%, and the down payment is going to be $10,000. So let's come up here to the right where we can see the total loan amount of $30,000. And once again, if the car costs $40,000 and we're putting $10,000 down, the balance is going to be $30,000. Now, come down here to where it says total loan interest. And if you go to the right, you'll see that over the course of this 5-year loan, you're going to be paying $5,642 in interest. That's a lot of interest. So how can we reduce this? How can we pay less interest over the course of this auto loan? I'm going to show you two ways. First, if you come over here to loan term and you reduce this from 60 months to 48 months, you're going to see this drop down significantly. You could see if you reduce this to a 4-year loan or 48 months, you're going to be paying $4,482 in interest compared to over $5,600 in interest. That's a savings of $1,200. But this does come with a catch. You can see your monthly payment went from $594 to almost $720 a month. That's nearly $130 more a month. And yes, if you go down this route, you're certainly going to pay a lot less in interest over the course of this loan, but you're going to be burdened with a much higher monthly payment. So how can we keep that lower payment and also pay less in interest over the course of the loan? I'll show you right now. So now we've switched this loan back to 60 months so we can have the smaller monthly payment as seen here at the top. This lower monthly payment is going to give you a little more wiggle room month to month. And if you have a month where you have a car repair or a home repair or something tapping into your monthly cash flow, you'll likely be very happy to have had this smaller monthly payment. But when you have good months where you have a little extra cash on hand, you can take that extra money and put it towards the principal of that loan as seen down here in this table. And when you do that, it reduces the amount of interest that you're going to pay over the course of this loan while maintaining this lower monthly payment. And the final point to know is that the first option, where you have a shorter loan term and a higher monthly payment, is going to result in paying less interest compared to the second option I just showed you. So it's up to you to properly balance these options into your budget. And now back to this visual. As you can see, yield, amount, and time can actually be used against you. When the yield or interest rate is increased, you pay more interest. And when the loan amount is larger, you also pay more interest. And when you have a longer time frame, you're going to pay more interest. So it's up to you to try and prepay the principal, reduce the time frame, and negotiate the best interest rate possible so you don't have money being pulled away from you in the form of interest. And for the final part of this video, we'll be studying interest paid on mortgages. And these loans are called amortizing loans. And it's actually sickening how much interest people pay with their mortgages. But I'm going to show you a way to get ahead of that. And for this example, I open up Excel. There's a loan amortization schedule that's free and pre-made as one of the templates. And here are the parameters of this loan. The loan amount is going to be $500,000. That's going to be your mortgage. The interest rate is 6.5%. The loan term is going to be over 30 years. So far, so good, right? Wrong. Come over here where it says total interest. The total interest paid over the course of this loan is going to be $637,000. That's $137,000 more than the actual principal of this loan. And that means your effective interest rate is actually 128%, not the very misleading 6.5% that you thought you were paying. But here's one way that you can get ahead of this interest. Come down here to where it says optional extra payments. If you do just $100 extra a month, you put $100 extra towards that principal every month, you're going to save a lot of money. Originally, you were on the hook for $637,000 in interest, but if you do just $100 a month, that's going to reduce your interest burden by over $65,000. And all you did was put an extra $100 a month towards your mortgage. And this is just one way that you can get ahead of this interest and keep more money in your pocket long term. So that concludes this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for future videos just like this. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. I hope this video has helped you understand how yield, amount, and time can be used to build massive amounts of wealth, but also how it can be used against you. And the final thing to keep in mind is that 9 out of 10 millionaires are first-generation millionaires, which means most people don't inherit their wealth and become wealthy through their own hard work. But even if someone did inherit their wealth, someone in that family tree started investing and steering that family towards a future of financial freedom and happiness. Let that person be you.